This video is going to introduce you to your questionable claims paper. I've already talked a little bit about it in class, but I wanted to make sure that you had a chance to look at it again. And please take a look at the instructions online. I have adjusted the due dates in light of our revised syllabus. So with the questionable claims paper, your goal is to choose or identify a commonly held belief. So when I say choose or identify, what I mean is that you can choose from a list from the instructions, like opposites attract, or personalities determined by zodiac sign, or you can identify one that you found that you want to explore more. If you want to pick your own, that is not on the list, just check with me to make sure that it's going to be an appropriate question for you to ask. You are more than welcome to pick your own topic, but run it by me first. I want you to find 2 peer-reviewed primary source research articles that have been published in journals about that topic. We're going to be spending some time learning about how to use databases and do searches in an additional video that walks you through how to look at that database and find articles. So keep your eyes open for that as an additional video that you can look through to help you find articles. This is where Google is not going to help you. You need to go to a database and you need to use specific search terms in order to find good articles and access them. I'm going to go through what peer-reviewed and primary source mean in just a little bit, but those articles are published in the format of journal articles. So when you see a newspaper story that says a recent study has found, that study is published in a journal. That's the method through which we deliver original scientific research. Different journals have different subjects, and we'll talk about that just a little bit more in a future slide. So you need to find 2 articles about that particular topic. So if you're doing opposites attract, you need to find 2 research studies that have been published in a psychology journal about that topic, and you need to summarize them. And then you need to conclude, hey, was that claim supported? Do opposites actually attract? This is one of the things I want you to explore in your paper. You can conclude that yes, the research does support that claim. Or you can say, hey, it turns out that actually that's not what's going on at all. Or it could be more complicated than that. And you could say, hey, it looks like there are some mixed results here, where some studies found yes and some studies found no. Or these are the conditions under which you see this particular behavior, and these are the conditions under which it doesn't happen. So it can be a variety of conclusions you can come to. In terms of some background terms, when something has been peer-reviewed, that means that if I did a research study, I couldn't just publish it on my blog and call it a day. If I want it to be recognized by my community as being a valid source, it needs to go through a process of review, editing, and publication through those journals. So the process of peer review is where I would send a manuscript off to a journal. An editor would then assign it out to people who are experts in that field, and they would review it and give me feedback. I'm actually in the process of waiting for some feedback from an article I submitted in December. They've been taking their time that I revised as a result of the reviews that they gave me. So I collected some new data and I made some edits to my manuscript and I resubmitted it, and now I'm waiting for the process of that review. But it's done by people who are considered to be experts in the field, who look through it and give feedback on that particular manuscript. This means that it goes through a fairly high standard where people are looking for high quality work and are expecting it to pass certain standards as a field. So it's a gatekeeping, and it makes sure that the things that are published tend to once again be of high quality and have appropriate methodology and measurement and are connected to the rest of the content in the field. If something is a primary source, what that means is that it has presented original research that the authors themselves have collected and are summarizing. A lot of the sources that you will encounter are actually secondary sources. So You might once again remember that example of a newspaper article saying a study has found. That's a secondary source where it's describing or defining that primary source. Your book is considered to be a secondary source because your book presents a lot of different research articles and summarizes them, but it's not summarizing original research. It's just describing what other people have done. Ciccarelli and White didn't collect their own data, they're summarizing other people's data. That's a secondary source. So I'm asking you to find a primary source where the authors are presenting original research that they collected themselves. A good general rule of thumb is that you know it's a primary source if the paper has a participant section and a results section. If they're talking about the people that they surveyed or that they did an experiment with and that they have results that they themselves found, then that's usually a very good sign that it's a primary source. I wanted to go through very briefly different types of journals just to orient you a little bit to what that is like. So for example, our top tier journals in psychology are Science, which is the top tier journal for every area of science, including psychology, and Psychological Science is the top journal in psychology. That paper that I told you about in class about acetaminophen and social rejection, where we did an fMRI study. I was part of that research team, and it was published in Psychological Science. So it was a top-tier journal. I was fifth author on that particular publication because of my contributions to that particular research. You can look it up if you want. If you want a link to it, I can send it to you. Social psychology is my field. I'm an experimental social psychologist, and the top journal in my field is the Journal of Personality and Social Psychology. I haven't quite cracked that egg yet. We'll see. There are also other social psychology journals that are slightly less competitive. Once again, when we say competitive, that means more people read it. It has a higher readership. Fewer manuscripts get submitted, and they only accept top-tier, cutting-edge research. So that's what we're looking at in terms of competitiveness. They're looking for things that are really moving the field forward and are, once again, very cutting edge. So it's very competitive. It's like getting into Harvard, in terms of a comparison. So self and identity, cognition and emotion, and basic and applied psychology are all examples of social psychology journals that are still peer-reviewed, that are still high quality, but are going to be slightly less competitive than the Journal of Personality and Social Psychology, and as a result have a slightly lower readership. And so those are different tiers of journals, just so you can kind of get to know that structure a little bit better. That manuscript that is currently under review that I told you about earlier is for the Journal of Cross-Cultural Psychology. So I will let you know once I hear from them. So the first step for this process is going to be finding an appropriate source or sources, because I'm asking you to find two. So I'm going to go through a video where you are going to get introduced to how you find the PsycInfo database and perform a search. The instructions for the paper provide you with some key terms that you can use for your searches if you pick one of the choices from the paper. So I'd recommend you look at the instructions to find key terms that you can use. This is going to be most of the problems that people have using databases, finding the right words to use. Unlike Google, you have to spell things properly. And unlike Google, it doesn't necessarily anticipate. You really do have to have the right terms in place that are in the database for it to find the sources you need. So see the video that I have on how to use the database in order to get your journey started to find those appropriate sources. And we're going to be going through how to summarize those sources, the different parts of a research article, and so on in subsequent weeks as we continue to learn more about this particular project. But your first step is finding good sources. I would also say, once you've found sources, if you don't know if they're going to work or not, you can always send me a PDF of your source if you don't know if it's going to work for your project. This is very important. A link to the search will not work. If you send me an EBSCO link, I won't be able to follow it through because of the way the database works. You would have to send me an actual PDF of the article that you found for me to be able to look at it. So you can attach that in an email and send it to me, and I can give you feedback about whether it will work for your paper. So your very first step is to find a good source and look at the video in order to move forward with that particular part of your project. But please go ahead and read through the instructions and let me know if you have questions. On a side note, Alicia Copley, who is our librarian, is working via email these days, but she knows what your project is and has a copy of it. So if you have any questions, you can ask me or you can ask her. And I'm going to go ahead and make sure that her email information is available on Canvas.